Hi, everyone. My name is Raquel with adtmag.com, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us. The topic of today's webcast is why mobile performance testing matters in 2021, sponsored by Kobiton. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping details. There will be a Q&A session towards the end of today's presentation, so please type any questions that you may have in the Q&A box. Kobiton has also provided some resources which correspond with today's webinar, and those can be found on the right-hand side of your console, so please take a moment to check those out. And additionally, this webcast is being recorded, so keep an eye out for a link in your email so you can rewatch the presentation or share it with a colleague. And now I'd like to introduce you to our two speakers. Today we will hear from Frank Moyer, CTO at Kobiton, as well as Alex Drag, Product Marketing Manager at Kobiton. So we are in for a great discussion today, and with that, I'll pass the time over to Alex to get us started.
Excellent. Thank you, Raquel. And thank you all for joining us today in this webinar. I'm really excited to work through some of the information that we have for you today. I think we'll all find it incredibly valuable. Before we do get started, I just want to go over the agenda. Let's just quickly cover what we're going to be talking about today. So first, Raquel, you already introduced the speakers for me, so that was great. So we can, I guess, skip that slide. Then we're going to look and just sort of provide some context and background around who we are here at Kobiton in case there are some of you on this call who are not aware of who we are and where we fit in the market. And then we're really going to get to sort of the meat of the presentation today and looking into what mobile performance testing actually is, because we have found in conversations with the wider market, there's some confusion here at times. And then we're going to look at why it matters, right? Like, why do we even need to care about this topic to begin with? At that point, if we've convinced everybody that it does actually matter, we're going to talk about how to ensure that that mobile app or website actually performs at a high level. And of course, as Raquel mentioned, we will open this up for Q&A at the end. So with that, I'll actually skip this introduction since everybody knows who we are, and we'll go ahead and start with who we are here at Kobiton. So when you look at the wider market, we see ourselves as the platform for quality-obsessed companies, right? And the major value that people have been finding, our customers have been finding on our platform, is that we help them eliminate that pesky app abandonment that is just so unique to the mobile space. I think the stat is something like 1 in 4 mobile apps are abandoned after their first use. We help our customers accelerate their automation and therefore get their app or mobile website to market faster and at higher quality, and ultimately convert much more opportunity, capture more revenue on your mobile channels, right? We do all of this, or our customers do all of this through working in our mobile experience platform. We'll talk in a few minutes about what that really means to us to be a mobile experience platform. But first, I did want to go over to some few of our rockstar customers who have been using the Kobiton platform to achieve some serious results. One of those being Rakuten, right? They came to us looking to tame what was a pretty chaotic device management situation and also scale mobile test automation across real devices in the cloud. Looking at Abercrombie and Fitch, I've been using the Kobiton mobile experience platform to help sort of revolutionize and lead that 73% of e-commerce, and you'll see this a little bit, is actually projected to be made via mobile devices. And Wikimedia using us to test and ensure that their product performs under real-world conditions on the web. So the question is, right, you've seen how they're using it, but the question that we usually ask is, how could you use Kobiton, right? And the exciting thing about it is that there really are a whole lot of things that can be done using the Kobiton mobile experience platform. And it all really starts with the real devices, right? So offering that infrastructure, real devices to access either in the cloud, on premises, and really multiple avenues in the cloud as well, to run your tests on and explore and be sure the tests you're running are actually running in reproduced real world conditions. But this really is where it gets exciting, right? Most vendors, most players in the space really stopped here at the infrastructure component. In Kobiton, here at Kobiton, we really focused on adding in solutions and feature sets that make your day-to-day as a tester or a developer, DevOps engineer, product manager better, right? So we offer a whole lot more in the way of ensuring quality really across the entire SDLC. And we know that mobile quality, right, it starts with developers. It doesn't just start in tests. That's why we've built solutions that actually allow developers to access real devices, real Kobiton devices, directly within their developer workbench, workstation, IDE, so that they can debug on these real devices actually before that code is pushed to test. But once it is pushed to test, testers, dev testers, really anybody who might want to test their application or websites can use our intelligent quality suite to drive comprehensive quality. You'll see what this means a bit more later on in the presentation, but really it's solutions around functional testing, performance testing, visual testing, and of course, in both a manual and an automated manner, an automation that you can use actually with a script-based approach or a scriptless approach, right? You can sort of inject the AI that we'll talk about in a little bit to make both of those automation approaches a whole lot more productive. But, we looked at this like, well, if you can find the issues, that's great, but what good is it if you can't resolve them, right? So this is why we've built solutions like AI-based remediation of functional, visual, and soon to come performance issues into our platform, as well as, of course, the industry's best session exploration, where you can really dive into in-depth test steps, individual test actions at specific moments of failure or irregularity, so that you can then pass this back to your dev team, and they can jump back into their IDE, right, debug the applications right there at the real device accessible. And of course, we integrate with the industry's favorite leading CI/CD tooling. But one of the things I like to call out here, right, is that integrations aren't everything. It's purposeful integrations that really matter, right? So what good is trying to kick off automated testing if the automation that you built isn't resilient and is going to break, right? The answer is that it's not really that great at all. And that's one of the things that we really do excel at, right? The automation you can create using the Kobiton platform, you can be sure it'll be resilient. You can be sure it's going to run on a real device and give you the results that you are looking for. And it's sort of, at the sort of this overarching layer above all this is the ability to keep actionable insight, traceability, visibility into what dev, test, PM, everyone's doing on the Kobiton platform with advanced reporting and analytics, right? That allow you to measure your success, track progress, and chart a course to continue to progress and grow and scale as an organization. And I mentioned earlier, this conversation around where we fit in the market. We see ourselves as sort of the quality platform, right, in an environment of disparate tooling. So there are all these categories here, all of these processes, technologies that you can see are really important and necessary when it comes to building and being able to deliver a perfect mobile experience to your customers. And sure, you could go and look for a bunch of sort of siloed tooling to take care of a bunch of different pieces here. What you're going to end up looking at is a complicated tool stack of 3, 4, 5 different tools to accomplish what we try to offer here with one platform, right? So once again, in the market, we see ourselves as this big platform player in a world of disparate tools. So with that, now that everybody has a general overview of who Kobiton is and where we fit in the wider market, let's go ahead and jump into what we're all here for, right? This discussion on performance testing in a mobile context. And the first question, right, before we dive in is, well, what is mobile performance testing? As I mentioned earlier, there's been some confusion around this, right? So what do I mean when I say performance testing? Some people tell me, well, it's load testing, make sure that our application performs under load. Some people say, well, I want to make sure that my device actually performs well. What does the battery look like? What is the CPU at? Memory. Stress testing. Some people say, well, let's test just the speed of the application, right? But what we really look at when it comes to performance testing, especially in a mobile context, is that none of these things really are wrong. It's just they're all pieces of the entire picture, right? So the definition that I like to put out there is, mobile performance testing is a multifaceted, incredibly crucial component of mobile testing, right? So when testing performance, your testers, developers, performance engineers need to make sure that device performs well under real-world conditions, can interact with the network seamlessly, and can handle load, stress, and volume at the server API level, right? So only then is mobile performance truly tested, right? So multifaceted, incredibly crucial, device, network, load, stress, volume, server, and API. All of these things really have to be covered. And to get into more in-depth conversation, about the actual individual kinds and components of performance testing that you need to make sure that you employ and implement, I want to hand it over to Frank to dive a little bit deeper into those different kinds of categories. So Frank, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Alex. I'm going to talk in more detail on each of the following slides about load testing, stress testing, endurance testing, volume testing, spike testing, and chaos testing. In the mobile context, what does it mean to test each of these components or implement each of these types of testing when it comes to mobile? Go ahead, Alex. Okay. So the first I'll go into detail on is performance testing. And this is the overarching part of the testing we're talking about today. And for each of the following slides, I'll talk about First off, the actual application itself, and the application typically connects to some backend API server, which has an app server and possibly a database. Sometimes there's some third-party interface that the app talks to, for example, like an ad server. And then Kobiton sits on the front of the functionality and making sure that it's not broken while the test is executing. And it's also providing a rich metadata for when the test executes, so you can go and analyze what was actually happening on the physical device while the test was executing. And then this, over on the right-hand side above the API server, this load generator, we don't suggest using Kobiton to create a lot of load through hundreds of devices. We think that the most effective way to create load when you're looking at the backend server part is to actually use tools like JMeter and Yodis, and Alex will go into that later. But actually using those tools to create load on the API server to create this, the load that's as needed. So the first underperformance test is load testing, and load testing is subjecting the server, the application under test, to differing levels of load on the API server in order to create real-world like scenarios and understand how the application under test responds to varying levels of load. So this would be, transactions per second. On the bottom left here, this diagram shows the response time of your application, certain test steps on varying levels of transactions per second. So you may, put it at 0, 1, 10, and increasing that load until you can draw a good curve and see, okay, what is the response time for all of my test steps? You're using your normal automation script pointing to the application under test using Kobiton to create that understanding of what is the response time this under this load. The next is stress testing. So this is applying varying levels and putting the application under test to a point of abnormal conditions or abnormal load. Typically this goes, you take load testing and then you exceed what your expected load is until you break the system. The goal here is to break the system and understand how the system behaves when it breaks. Typically what you'll see is, something happens on the app itself where you get unable to reach server, or the response time goes to the point where it's not responding. This is also when you see a lot of crashes occur, because in normal developer workflows, they're testing the happy path. They're testing when the backend responds in an expected order. So, the call to login completes before the display is rendered. And when those things start to come out of sync, out of expected order, that's when you start to get race conditions, and is the most common cause of application crashes. And so while you're subjecting your app to a high level of stress, you're also monitoring the app server logs, where you can see exceptions, you can see things that are going on behind this on the back end that the user doesn't see. And then back to the Kobiton part, when you analyze the results, you can actually see what was breaking, right? So the challenge is, if you don't have that visual validation that is offered by Kobiton, when you're executing your test, you have to go through potentially hours of logs or hours of video to see what was happening and to see if anything broke. With Kobiton's visual validation and performance tracking, you can actually put thresholds for your performance and say, hey, if anything exceeds 2 seconds, I want to be notified. Or if something was actually rendering incorrectly in the user interface, we would be able to detect that against a baseline, so you don't have to go through all of those visual reviews manually. And then going on to the next slide, that's sort of overall stress testing. And you'll see a common theme here when we get to endurance testing. So endurance testing is, okay, I'm not talking about the volume above abnormal conditions, but how does my app perform if the user's uses it for 12 hours straight? What does that look like? And this is typically used to identify memory leaks. That's the most common purpose of endurance testing, where you can subject run your automation tests for hours and hours on end. We have one customer who typically runs their tests for 12 hours, and then they take about a 15-minute break, and then they run another 12 hours. That is a lot of their user flow is for doctors and nurses who are in the hospital, and they have their app up constantly. So they've had issues with memory leaks in the past, and so they use Kobiton to check the CPU and memory while the test is running to see how it behaves over a long period of time. The next type of test is volume testing. So this, you continue to put load on the system, but here is to increase the size of the data and to see how the application under test responds is very large. And to see, as the database size increases, what is the impact to the response time? Again, using Kobiton for that front end to check what the response times are and to see how it deviates for each test step, as you go from a gig in a table to 100 gig to a tera volume testing. And usually you find like table scans or missing indexes when you put this in place. And so that's a summary. Obviously, I didn't cover all of them, but those give you some of the highlights and how you can leverage Kobiton for these tests.
Thanks, Frank. I really appreciate you diving into that really deep, and I'm sure that we all do here. I mean, it can get really complicated, and it's a nuanced discussion, right, around exactly what does it mean to do performance testing. So it's good to see all of them. And on that note, you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, there's all these things I need to do. Are you sure? Are you sure that this needs to actually happen? Why does this matter that much? So I definitely want to dive into this really quickly before we actually start talking about how to tackle these different kinds of testing and to make sure that the performance of your mobile app or website is optimal. So I'm actually going to hand the mic over to Adobe for a minute. They had recently done some analysis on some 2020 holiday shopping and tracked the sort of the digital shopping trends and revenue amongst, I think it was some of the top 100 US retailers. So just bear with me for a moment. Let me get this video going. It should only be about a minute and a half.
Our market-leading Adobe Analytics Toolkit, looking across all of these visits to retail sites across the US, found a number of really interesting trends. I'd say first and foremost, the power of the smartphone. It is the leading type of device as people are visiting and browsing retail websites, accounting for fully over 60% of visits to retail websites and almost 40% of purchases. So it's clear consumers have gotten a lot more comfortable shopping from their phones.
So I think there the header was, the smartphone is king, right? And just sort of recap what Adobe was talking about. This is also a source from that same Adobe Digital Trends research. When you're looking at this e-commerce activity between November 1st and December 31st, 2020, once again amongst some of the top US retailers, you look at a total of $188.2 billion spent, right? And when you look at the share of revenue by device type, nearly 40%, $74.6 billion was captured via a smartphone, via a mobile device, compared to 61%, right, on a laptop and other devices. But the interesting thing here, right, so 40 and 60, what's interesting is their conversion rates were still greater than two times lower than they are for web, right? So you're thinking, okay, well, how can it almost be sort of neck and neck here? But it's still 2 times lower than web. So what this tells me, or it's supposed to be a few things, right? That one, there's a whole lot of revenue left on the table, right? There's so much more that mobile could do if these conversion rates were bumped up, right? It also tells me I need to look into what might be causing this, right? So that I can capture more revenue and convert more on my mobile channels. And when we look at why, when we look at the actual reasons why, this revenue, these conversion rates might be low, there are some really interesting industry research and some stats out there that talk about it, right? So just to back up one moment to sort of justify some of these claims, right, that mobile is so important. There's some research out there that shows that 73% of e-commerce sales are going to be made on a mobile device by the end of 2021. So that is this year. It's coming soon, right? And when you look at the abandonment rate of your mobile shopping carts, where so much of this conversion is lost, you're looking at an astonishing 85% for mobile shopping carts, right? And when you're looking at some of the reason for this, and I think this is going to sort of guide the rest of our conversation, because this is really where we look at why performance matters. 70% of smartphone app or site abandonment is due to pages taking too much time to load. I believe this is Google's research. And also, Google's research is look at how 40% of mobile shoppers will make no more than 3 seconds before abandoning a retail or travel site, right? So here, load speeds, performance of the mobile site or application, crucially important, right? And that sort of naturally leads us into this conversation on how can organizations adapt, right? All this revenue could be captured if conversion rates were a little higher, and this is much a result of poor performance, right? So in my mind, the adaptation strategy here is implementing an intelligent strategy around performance testing. And Frank, you mentioned all these different kinds of performance testing. I think to make it really consumable and sort of easy to take back to work, I've sort of grouped it into 3 major categories, right, of performance to make sure you test for. The first is device, right? So you want to make sure that your app under test can be tested against device-specific elements, right, such as memory, CPU usage, battery. What does it look like when it's actually being used alongside other apps on that device? What's the startup time look like for that device? The next is network, right? So how does the app under test behave against different aspects, variations, regularities in network? So kinds of network, when the network is throttled. Also, you want to make sure that their request and response times are acceptable. And if they aren't, you need to be able to see exactly what might be causing that issue, right? And then the third, you're looking at load, stress, volume. You're looking at all these things at the server and API level, right? So you want to test the efficiency of data, load, volume being sent to and from servers, virtualize that load, stress, and volume, and test the efficiency of API calls, and all of this in real-world conditions, right? So strategy is great. You've got your 3 categories. We wanted to put together a checklist also you can sort of take back to work, make sure that you're capturing and considering all of these areas, right, when trying to implement this intelligent performance testing strategy. And one thing here that you'll notice, we've broken it up into 3 different sections. I think a lot of people, vendors, users as well, will talk about sort of solving the issues of testing, of agile, of DevOps, as if it's just really looking for that silver bullet tool. And there's no doubt technology and tools are important, but the reality is that all these different modes of delivery and development, it's people, process, and technology and tools, right? So you want to make sure that you do pay attention to this people and process component. And I'll just quickly run through this bulleted list so that we can all be on the same page here. When it comes to people, you might want to ask yourself a question: do we even have enough bandwidth to begin with, right, to test the performance of our applications? If so, great. If not, well, we need to look at how we can create this, right? How can we, create some more room, time, energy, and effort budget to make sure that the performance is taken care of? Do we have and/or need dedicated performance engineers? How are we going to deal with issues? How are we going to really dive into and find issues that might be there without our knowledge? And if scripting automation, right, I think that we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but automation is a crucial component of this strategy. Do we have the technical skill to actually make this happen? When it comes to process, I think really taking a sort of real world and real device approach is crucial. Emulators simply just won't cut it. You just cannot reproduce all of the real world conditions when testing on emulators or simulators. Remember that geography matters, right? So it's crucial to be able to test the performance of a device given certain areas around the world. look to automation, speed up testing, and so you can boost overall coverage and quality. Make sure you're shifting performance testing left and shifting right, right? So a lot of people will talk about performance testing and sort of talk about monitoring performance in production. That's great. I'm not saying we should stop that. But we want to make sure that we're also shifting your performance testing left into test and into development. Take a comprehensive approach. So Frank has shown us everything that we need to make sure that we consider. And definitely make sure to have archivable artifacts from test always accessible. Visibility and traceability are key, so that you can track across releases what might be making performance worse or better as your product is further updated. When it comes to technology, you want to make sure you have the real devices necessary to actually test load stress under the real world conditions, right? And actually see that front end and see how it's affecting the UX. Remember, you can access these real devices in the cloud or on premises, and geography matters. We'll dive a bit deeper into that in just a few slides. And look for solutions, Frank mentioned, to test load and stress, like NeoLoad or JMeter, right, to make sure that you can test the network server API performance. And you want to also make sure that you have solutions that can test for network payload. So you're looking at request response time, because even if you're finding there's an issue with performance, there's an issue with load speeds, if you can't really dive deep into the request and response timing, what exactly is causing these issues, it's not really going to do much good for you. You need to be able to dive into that and actually be able to remediate for and share what is actually at the root of these problems. I mentioned automation already. You want to make sure that you are able to employ certain automation technology and test automation tooling that can benefit both your technical and less technical teams. Because the fact is that across the enterprise and across the industry, levels of technical skill absolutely do vary. So you want to make sure that you can cover all of these before you sort of dive deep into implementing your intelligent performance testing strategy.
Yeah, and just to tag on to that, Alex, that bandwidth part for making sure you have the resources available, the people available, I'd say about half of the effort is actually getting the scripts ready and executing the tests, and then you spend the other half of the time analyzing the results, figuring out the root cause, and if you don't have the right tooling in place, that's not just as long, it's 2 times as long or 3 times as long. So making sure that you've got a good plan and that you're planning for when there is an issue, how do I quickly analyze the results to determine what the root cause is?
No, that's absolutely right. I'm so glad you added that, Frank. And some great foreshadowing for some of the session exploration and root cause analysis that we're going to talk about a little bit later on in the presentation. So now we've got our sort of three-pronged strategy. We've got our checklist, but the reality is it isn't as easy as that, right? There are challenges that are typically in the way for teams. And so I've sort of broken these challenges down to 4 major hurdles that teams need to be able to work past, get beyond. And the first is device availability, right? So we've established that real devices are necessary. The problem here, right, is that procuring and managing these real devices yourself can be incredibly difficult and very, very expensive, especially as you grow and as you scale as an organization. And the fact is as the amount of devices grow, right, you're looking at thousands of devices active and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of them being added every single year. So being able to manage and procure all that yourself, pretty difficult. The second big challenge, right, is how do you reproduce real world conditions, whether that be real world load, stress, volume, or network type, right? What do you look at? You're looking at the battery, the geography, location. So all of these things matter, right? And teams sometimes have a challenge and a struggle reproducing these in their test environment so that they can actually adequately test their performance amongst multiple scenarios and contexts. The third is a complex tool stack. So, Frank, I think you described like 5 or 6 or 7 different kinds of performance testing. And the reality is you have a lot of siloed tooling out there that really just does one or half of one kind. And teams see this, and the teams that want to make sure that they tackle comprehensive performance often feel that they have to end up investing in a very complex and therefore expensive tool stack, right, in order to cover for every necessary component. And the fourth here, and Frank, you just mentioned this and alluded to it perfectly, automation is freaking hard. You spend, like you said, so much time just writing the scripts, right? And then it might be maintaining the scripts. And the fact is, this extends way beyond just performance, right? So with the amount of device permutations and fragmentation, functional test scripts are really resilient enough to work on their own. And that's before you might add in performance assertions, right? Or other performance, components of performance testing. And let's sort of dive into that automation piece, right? And because you might ask, okay, well, if it's so hard, well, I guess I can just do some of this manually. And I guess you could do some of it manually. It might look like hitting a button on your device and having a stopwatch and seeing how fast it might load, right? But I think we can all agree that that's not super realistic across a wide amount of devices and teams across the enterprise. And the fact is, like, you just can't do everything manually that you could do if you have the right approach employed for automation. And as you look at some of these reasons, right? I've sort of covered them here. The first is higher coverage. You're talking about freeing up bandwidth. If you're able to automate a lot of the testing that you're doing currently manually, well, this does free up the bandwidth, right? To create test plans and test suites and test cases that do offer a much higher coverage across the board, performance, functional quality, visual quality included, right? And if you're taking the right approach to quality, you can actually get higher quality. It's not just being faster, it's not just time. The quality of your application can actually dramatically increase, right? Because if you're doing this the right way, oftentimes you can capture more potential issues, defects. You can even capture performance issues whilst also capturing functional visual defects sort of at the same time if you're taking the right approach and using the right technology. And of course, fast time to market, right? You could be building the highest quality application possible, but if your 5 or 6 competitors get their application out the door way before you, there's a chance that they're going to gobble up that market share. And automation is going to help you sort of avoid that, right? And beat your competitors to the punch, get this highest quality application to the market fastest. I often say that, the best and first at the finish line is the winner of the vast majority of market share. So just another reason, right, to employ automation when it comes to your performance and other kinds of testing. So I want to take a few moments here to sort of dive into how Kobiton can help. We've talked a whole lot about what you need to do, why it matters, what all this means. And here we are at Kobiton, and we're going to talk about some of the solutions that we offer that can make this possible, for your teams. And if we look back at the strategy real quick, sort of this three-prong, device performance, network performance, server API stuff, Kobiton fits in at every area here, right? With devices, we do have the real devices, right? If you want to simulate these real-world conditions, you can look and you can work on and test against real devices that are available in cloud, on premises, or in a hybrid deployment option, right? For network, we have this intelligent payload capture capability and solution that teams have been really enjoying and are really excited about, that actually allow you to dive deep into the issues that might be associated with certain network requests and responses taking way too long, right? And this works for your manual and your Appium automation. And we're also adding performance assertions for scriptless as well as for Appium that are going to make, Frank mentioned earlier, automatically flagging where there's an issue. We're going to make this a whole lot easier to capture, right? At the server API level, we have the real devices and infrastructure necessary to sort of point or to see the impacts from UX from virtualized load and stress that solutions like a Neotis might be able, or Neoload might be able to offer your teams. So let's dive deep into each one of these categories. I mentioned the real devices, and we sort of talk about real devices however you want them, right? And choosing device freedom. With Kobiton, you have this device cloud that allows you to remotely access devices from anywhere in the world, right? And sort of create this ultimate testing cloud, spanning multiple locations across multiple geographies. And this allows you to reproduce those real world conditions, right? It allows you to throttle network. It allows you to see what happens when you switch from Wi-Fi to 3G to 4G to 5G. And of course, we make this easy, right? There's these flexible options around real devices. You can access instant, ready-to-go devices in the public cloud. You can set up private clouds where you have devices in the cloud that are totally, private and reserved for your organization. You can even cloudify local devices. So if you've already invested in a device lab and you've already been trying to manage and procure your devices, you can plug these into a Mac product, download our software, and you can upload them right to the cloud. Right, so that everyone across your team, no matter where they are, can access them. And of course, for teams who are looking for on-premises solutions, really extra sensitive deployments, we do offer that as well. So really, real devices, however you want them, allows you to reproduce those real-world scenarios to really test for performance in an in-depth manner. And I mentioned earlier, perfecting with our intelligent quality suite, and this extends to performance as well, right? It's really neat, and beyond performance, you also have functional testing, visual testing. And you can run these tests across all of your mobile and IoT devices that you can access through the Kobiton Cloud or on-premises solutions. And what's really neat about this is that it kind of looks like, well, maybe I can run one functional test, I can run a visual test, and I can run a performance test. It's like, well, I don't want to necessarily run 3 tests. That's why you make it easy, right? Run 1 test, and you get all these results through the Kobiton Intelligent Quality Suite with our assertions, our ability to have that visual validation that Frank was talking about, and some of our visual design testing that we've recently introduced to our platform as well. And when you're automating these tests, we would make sure that we are always flexible and always inclusive. I've mentioned a scriptless approach earlier, this AI-driven scriptless test automation that we offer. But we realize, there's a whole lot of value, and we're going to dive into what teams have been accomplishing with this scriptless approach. But we also realize there's a whole lot of value in a whole lot of teams that really enjoy using their script-based solutions, right? And that's why we made the AI engine that is at the core of a lot of the test automation capabilities that we offer, flexible enough to bolster the productivity of these script-based solutions, as well as drive the possibility of totally scriptless mobile test automation. And with that, I do want to dive into this story about this AI engine, right? It's the Kobiton Nova AI engine that we recently launched in December, this next generation of the AI engine that's been behind our scriptless, and just kind of looking at what some of our, what some customers, what some users have been finding. There's a great example where there's a leading auto manufacturer that had originally, with their first version of their app, spent a year and a half, right, compiling a test automation suite, test automation library using Appium. It took them a year and a half to get all that done, to be able to cover it for everything they needed to test for, or they felt they needed to test for. They switched over to the Nova approach with Kobiton. They've been trying that out, and they found that they were able to accomplish what took them a year and a half in 2 weeks, right? It's a 39x improvement in speed. And they found more bugs, because originally what they were looking for, there was just functional tests that were being run, right? But because we have this functional and visual approach, they're able to find so much more and uncover so much more that was impacting the quality of their application, while also looking at this 39x improvement in time to automation, right? And now, as Frank mentioned, we're adding performance assertions. So, I mean, can you imagine how much more your teams will be able to find, how much more this team would have been able to find? We'll be able to find now that performance assertions are a part of the mix.
And just to touch on that briefly, Alex. The other advantage to highlight that there was an issue during your testing, that there was a performance issue. One of the most time-consuming tasks, not just during performance testing, just normal functional testing, when something takes longer than you had anticipated. What was the cause? Was it the payload increased from 500K to 5 meg? Was it a different device type? Was it chipset was slower? So these are all the contributing factors to what would cause a specific step in a test to perform more slowly from one release to the next. And we give you that analysis so that we say, it's one of the things we'll be adding is it's probably because your payload increased, and that's why it was slower this time. Determine what causes it versus just saying, hey. Yeah, sorry, I might have broken up there, Alex, but.
Well, that's fine. No, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Sorry.
Great. No, you're fine. No, you're fine. Are we ready to move on?
So we'll be able to let you know exactly the Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. Yeah, so Frank, I think you're referring to, I know we had a bit of a technical issue there, being able to dive deep, right, into the exact issues that might be affecting your performance from some mobile application or website. One of these things was payload, right? So one of the things that we've recently released, or the past few releases, is this network payload analysis. So after your test has actually been run, you can dive deep within our Session Explorer and actually look at the specific issues that might be causing certain amounts of performance lags. Right? You can look at the timestamps. You can look at how long certain elements took to actually be sent or received onto your device. So you can look at images, videos, applications, font, a whole assortment of things, right? So you can really pinpoint and identify the exact things that are the problem. And we're actually going to, if we have enough time here at the end, we're going to show a quick demo that one of our SEs prepared. Maybe can't be with us today, but he prepared this for this presentation so that you all can actually see this in real time. And we've called out, integrating and working alongside solutions that can sort of virtualize stress and load, right? So we have, and this is why we have this really great, work very closely with Neotest, and we have this integration with Neoload that allows you to generate the certain percentage of the load from NeoLoad on that side, sending traffic on the protocol level, and then running that across Kobiton real devices and seeing the actual front end and the impact on the UX of the UX and UI of the application. And it's really neat. They have a data sheet out there on their website that talks about some of the results that teams have found. And they found that this led to them up to 10x faster test creation and maintenance using this combination of NeoLoad and Kobiton. And when you look at sort of this total performance package between the two tool sets and where everything kind of fits in, right? So you have this access to the real devices in the Kobiton cloud, capture payload, test application, site performance, its battery, memory, CPU, et cetera, all things, network type, all things that you can reproduce on the Kobiton side. Also virtualizing that load on the server and load and trust on the server via NeoLoad, and then ultimately being able to manage or analyze and measure how your load is impacting performance, how performance ultimately impacts the overall user experience. So I mentioned just a minute ago that we're actually going to show you a clip of what this looks like, a quick demo that our SC prepared of the payload capture, because I think it's really exciting. So I'm going to play that video just one moment before we wrap up and get to questions.
So we have the ability to come to these details here. So this is where the system metrics is. This is the iframe movie that Frank and Alex was talking about. And then here is our payload right here. So I'm going to play this video real quick. You have the ability to stop it. You can see that the payloads are down here in the different purples. And then you have the ability to expand this as well. So you can see that there's multiple ones right here. And then you can do this drop down or this expand. So you're going to see the request. You're going to see the response. You can do the same thing for this. You can see that this is an application with the JSON. This is an application with the JSON as well. And if I move this one down here, let's see if we can get a different one. So this one is going to be an image. And then this one is going to be a font. And so the font type right here. So this is the ability to expand it. You can actually make a hyperlink as well. So say you found an issue with this, you're seeing exactly where you're clicking on the device. This might be a bug. You can make a hyperlink right here and send this right to your developers as well. And you can actually expand the response as well. So you can see how long something is taking. So this is the timestamp right here from start to finish. And you can do that up here as well too. So you can expand all this as well for the other application in JSON.
So you saw there that Tyler SC was working through was the Session Explorer that Frank and I have mentioned multiple times here. And you can notice, I don't know if you didn't notice, but it's incredibly navigable, right? That timeline at the bottom there is broken up into multiple segments that are each associated with a certain test step or test action. So you really can dive into the exact areas that might be impacting performance, function, visual quality, et cetera. So definitely really, really neat. And if Tyler were here, I would thank him for showing us this demo. So I just want to wrap up quick. I want to make sure we leave time for questions, but I do want to make sure that we have a quick summary of what we discussed today, given that there's a whole lot of information. Looking here now, it looks like it's 36 slides, right? So a whole lot of information that we shared with you all today. So the first thing to make sure that we take away is that mobile matters, right? If you remember that stat, that over 73% of e-commerce sales are projected to be made on a smartphone by the end of 2021. Imagine where it might go in the years further, right? So mobile, incredibly crucial channel, and we just cannot ignore it. And sort of to tack on to that, performance of your mobile application website matters as well. It's a leading reason why users abandon apps and shopping carts online. The fact is, mobile users are much less tolerant of poor performance and experiences as they are on desktop web. Remember that 1 in 4 stat on mobile applications that are banned after their first use. Remember that also that lack of conversion when compared to desktop web experiences, right? When you're actually tackling performance testing, when you want to make sure that your performance is as high quality as possible, comprehensive is key. We can't just think of performance testing as load testing or as just checking the battery and CPU and memory. We have to really include we have to make sure we tackle all of these different areas of performance. Right? So make sure to take a comprehensive strategy in tackling mobile performance in that mobile context. And one of the cool things that's exciting is, there are solutions out there that do help bolster the people, bolster the process, right, by offering the technology. And Kobiton, we believe, is one of these solutions, right? So we offer this next-gen testing and quality mobile experience platform that allows you to ditch this legacy disparate tool stack for a more consolidated, more automated, and much more user-friendly option for mobile performance testing. And And with that, I think we have about 10, 15 minutes left, so I do want to hand it over and make sure that over to you all to open the floor up to ask any questions you might have for us.
All right, awesome. So yeah, if you have any questions for Alex or Frank, please type them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them now. So our first question is asking, will Kobiton's assertions work only for scriptless tests, or will it also work for my automation that I've already built in Appium?
Frank, I'll take this. So, one of the things, and I hope I had mentioned this earlier, maybe I missed it. Yes, the assertions, both functional, visual, crash, and performance, they do and will work for scriptless. But one of the things that's really important for us, right, is that we have a solution that is, sort of ever inclusive and flexible. So no matter how you're automating, we want to make that better. So the long story short here, yes, it will also work for the automation that you've already built in Appium. As you run your test through Kobiton, we have plans to make these assertions work in those situations as well.
All right, perfect. Next question here is asking, if I use scriptless automation with Kobiton, can I execute the captured manual process across multiple devices at the same time? And do you also give us the script?
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you asked this, because I don't think I didn't clarify this earlier. When you're looking at our intelligent quality suite, one of the major components here is compatibility testing, right? So having real devices and having automation that is driven by real AI, right? I get frustrated too at the AI and just marketing. The AI that we've taught and has learned is the real deal. Having sort of that ability to actually navigate and execute and adapt changing elements across different device types, resolutions, screen sizes, et cetera. This does enable you to be able to execute this one manual process that is captured across all these different devices at the same time, and it ends up working, right? It doesn't just break the moment it runs into an issue of low confidence. So it's definitely really exciting. And yes, when it comes to, I think you asked about giving you the script. Yes, so at the end of this, once the test is executed, once you've captured it, you can actually export that as a 100% open standard Appium script, so that you can sort of take it, do whatever you want with it, run it on a competing device platform, do it, literally add assertions, do whatever you want. It's at that point it's your code, so we think you should be able to use it however you want to.
All right. Can I get functional, visual, and performance results with one test, or do I have to run multiple different tests?
Now, this is one of the things I think I hit earlier, that one of the really exciting things is that it really is, it's one test. You run this one manual process on your device, choose which device you want to execute across, it executes, it runs, and you'll get this functional, visual, and performance results sort of all in one to be able to remediate for the issues that we flag for you automatically.
Perfect. This question is asking, how can I integrate Kobiton with a tool like NeoLoad for stress and load testing on real devices?
So there's a process involved. So I would reach out to us. I would check out our website, contacts, I think it's at info@kobiton.com, and we can make sure that we can work with you to make that happen.
All right. How about, does network payload capture work for both Android and iOS devices?
Yes, we actually, so we released this and it worked for Android, but we have an upcoming release very soon. And this is expanding that support for iOS as well.
And another key point is it supports both HTTP and HTTPS, so intercept that payload and decrypt the payload for analysis.
Great. Yes, thank you for adding that, Frank.
All right, perfect. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have for today. If you have any other questions, please type them in the Q&A box, and someone from Kobiton will reach out. But Alex and Frank, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your expertise with the audience. We really appreciate it. And also thank you to the audience for attending today's webcast, which was sponsored by Kobiton and presented by adtmag.com. This concludes today's webcast. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.